So with that said, I am going to pass it over to Erin. I'm going to mute myself and also shut my camera.
All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning and happy Earth Day. It is a beautiful day here in California. Absolutely stunning. Started the day out on the bay, saw the water, drove home through the wildflowers, and now I'm here with all of you. So I'm just very excited to be starting off our first live stream for our spring box. So a couple things that I wanted to touch base on before we get started. I would love for you to be making along with me so that you have something that you're kind of exploring, and as questions come up, please do put them in the chat. I would love to answer them in the moment and hopefully demonstrate or show you something in response to your questions. We'll do a couple different things today, and also do some active working in or playing in our journals. And then I'll also do a little bit of show and tell, so showing some books and pages that are completed so you can get a sense for how all of that goes. I know for some people, you've already started your art journal practice, and for some others, this may be a new practice and a new way of working. So I want to show you and give as many ideas as possible. So first thing I wanted to say is about starting a journal. So we'll go ahead and look at the top-down camera. This is the journal that I've started for the spring box. I have started it already, but I wanted to show you something that I always do when I start a new journal, which is to put the date in. So I always date it with the first day that I start working in a book, and then usually I do it in the inside back cover, but with our ArtJournalSnacks journals, we have this wonderful spot that's a great place to kind of say, I finished it on this date. You could, of course, put the start and the end date here on this handy little spot on the back as well. Okay, so next thing I like to do when I start a journal is I like to go in and make some messes for myself. So some of you may have had the experience of getting this journal and looking at all these blank pages and saying, oh my gosh, where do I start? I have all these new supplies and I have all this ephemera and I'm not sure what I should do first. And this box ended up with something that is really great for this problem, which is the mixed media sprays that we got in this box. These are so wonderful for kind of taking away some of the fear of the blank page. So I'm going to put a little bit of, this is finger painting paper that I'm going to put down here just to make sure I keep track of a little bit of the overspray here. And just get those notifications away. Okay, great. So a couple things you can try with the mixed media spray is just to kind of spray it on some pages. Don't worry about what it looks like. And then shut that page and peel it back open. And you get a little bit of that kind of Rorschach kind of idea, right? We're not doing that today, though. And you can use some of the other sprays in a different way. So with this, I'm just taking the lid off and dripping it out the little tube there. And with that, you can actually get lines. And you can get pretty fine lines with that, which is a fun thing. And then you can also spray at kind of a very close distance. So you see you get a little bit more concentrated color that way, and it's going to drip a whole lot more. So again, when you close your book and then peel it back open, you have a lot more pigment on the page. Many of you know this trick because I've talked about this all the time, is to use wax paper and just put that right into your page where you've got your still wet pigment. This mixed media spray is acrylic based, so with this kind of spray, you wouldn't want to spray it on and then close the page while it's still wet, because you're going to end up with pages stuck together. It's not the end of the world if your pages stick together. There are some things you can still do, but it is a thing to know that that will happen. Okay. So that's one way that you can play with blank pages. Another thing you can do with some of your blank pages is to just scribble. So I'm going to grab just a crayon here, and I'm just going to scribble onto this page. Again, I don't have a plan. I don't know what I'm going to do with this page yet, but this is taking away some of that fear of the blank page, right? So when I get a new journal, that's like the hardest thing, right? Like, what are the first marks I'm going to make? What is the first page I'm going to do? And doing some of this stuff, again, helps to take away that fear and enables you to have a place to start when you do decide, okay, I'm ready to start journaling. Okay, so this next thing we'll do is something that we've been doing in each of the boxes so far, which is to show 3 different ways to use one of the materials that came in the box. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of elbow room here. And the material that we're going to try that with is the stencil. Okay, so out of the pack of stencils, many of you have heard me say this already, that polka dots are my favorite. So I was very excited about the polka dot stencils in this box. So step number 1 with stencils is to use it in kind of the very traditional way that one would use a stencil, right? Which is to use it with a pen and using the stencil to create the pattern. And one of the things that you can think about when you're doing this, and I'm using the gray micron that came in our box, but when you're putting the stencil onto the surface, think about, am I going to go through and get every single part of the pattern? Or am I going to pick and choose and do it a little bit more randomly? Now, with the polka dot pattern that came in our box, it does have a little bit of that variation already because it has 3 different sizes of polka dots. This just makes me love this stencil even more. You'll notice that this is the stencil that's gotten the most use from me so far in this box. And you should let us know in the chat which stencil pattern you like best, or which is the one that you've used the most so far. Or if you felt intimidated and you haven't used any of them yet. Today we're going to play with them in a couple different ways. So hopefully, if that's you, you'll feel comfortable jumping right into it very soon. Okay. I'm just going to do a few more of the little ones here. Yeah, the honeycomb pattern is a fun one for sure. I'll show you. This is more of a conversation for ephemera hour, but I may have bought a package of seeds specifically to go with the honeycomb pattern stencil. So I'll show you the ephemera that I got for that. Okay, so that's one way to use the polka dot, or to use the stencil, is to use your pen and use it to transfer that over. Okay, the next way is to use it with the sprays. And for this, I'm going to bring in a little bit more wax paper just to kind of keep my space somewhat protected. So this will keep my other stuff a little bit masked off. And one of the things that's fun to play with your stencil is you can put it all the way flat down onto the paper and get a really crisp line. Or if you let it lift up a little bit, you can see the shadow it's creating there, which is kind of fun. But that's going to give you, in some spots, the pattern will be very distinct. And in other spots, it's going to be a little bit more faded, almost like you've used an airbrush. So I'm going to do that here, where I'll have kind of a closer to the page over there and a little bit more distance from the paper on this side. Sorry to my fingers. They're just gonna get sprayed. It's just how it is. Okay. So there we can see our polka dots. I've got some really good fingers going here. This is the art therapist occupational hazard. My hands are always covered in something. Okay, so that is way number 2, is to use the spray, or you can use paint and use the stencil to block off the white of the page. Now, the third thing that you can do, I'm going to set the book aside for a moment here. And put this down. I'm going to get, this is just a small clipboard that I'm going to use so I can have a little bit of a harder surface. And I'm going to take this lovely little round thing was from, I think, a pastry. And it was sitting in a little cafe, and they had a whole box full of these. And I thought these were really delightful little bits of ephemera that were just there for the taking. And I'm going to take a crayon. And so you can use the stencil to make a rubbing also. So 3 different ways that one tool can give you something to create with. I need a little darker. Yeah. So this pastry paper is not giving me a super clean line. It's a little bit bumpy because it's like a wax paper. But if I use just a plain piece of paper, I can get something a little better. Yeah. The good thing about being in the art nest here in the studio is I've got paper all around, all sorts of odds and ends. Yeah, that's a lot better. So of course, you can also do this directly in your journal. It's just my journal has a lot of stuff in it right now, so makes doing a rubbing directly onto the page itself a little harder. If you want to do a lot of rubbings in your journal, I would suggest doing them sooner than later, before you get a lot of things glued in there, because you will get textures from the other pages will transfer over. Okay. There is my little bit of rubbing. Oh, that page has gone missing. Ready? Okay. So then, the reason I didn't do the rubbing directly on this is I already had something on the other page, so it wouldn't transfer well. Now, the reason I use the wax crayon to do this is now I have something that's going to create a resist. So it's almost like a 4th technique, right? Because you could do a rubbing with colored pencil, you could do a rubbing with a lot of other types of media, but using the wax crayon means that now I have this, which will create a resist. So now I can start to kind of play with these 3 different ways of using the stencil, using other materials. So I'm going to use a little bit of watercolor and you can see how wonderful that resist is from that crayon. And what I'm doing is using a little watercolor that kind of goes nicely with that acrylic spray. There are lots of different types of media sprays that you can get. The thing that I really like about these mixed media sprays that you got in this box is they are acrylic based. So while some of the other sprays come in all sorts of different colors and you can get glittery ones and all sorts of different things, but many of them are water-based. So you couldn't do this, right? You couldn't watercolor over the top and have it stay put. It would blend around, which has its own benefits, but the mixed media sprays can do a lot more in my opinion. And I see in the chat, Paula, yes, that is a great idea, is to spray and then take this immediately while the spray on here is still wet and press it onto another page or kind of squish it in between two other pages. Then you get that transfer. That works with if you use acrylic on it also, regular paint. Okay, so you can see that I'm chatting with you as I'm moving this paint around. I'm not worrying too much right now about what my paint is doing. I'm just adding it in to start to blend these three areas together. So here I'm going to go right up to the edge of the gray.
Hey, Erin, it's Sarah jumping in here for a moment. I saw in the comments, someone's asked if the sprays are refillable. A couple things. One is I don't believe they're refillable. However, it is a very thin acrylic spray. So when you run out, if you have like an acrylic ink that you want to put in a spray bottle as opposed to a dropper, you can switch them around. You know, you can fill it up. And one anecdote about the Marabou sprays. Marabou is discontinuing the sprays. I know, breaking news. We don't have any in the shop right now, but we actually purchased the rest of like their lot that's in the US basically. Because that's who we are. We're ArtSnacks. We do those kinds of things because we're crazy. So let's see, it's April now. Give it like a month or two. They have to, you know, be shipped to us and stuff like that. So they'll be in the warehouse soon and on the shop soon as well. So we'll let you know. But yes, sad news, they're discontinuing the sprays. So hold on to your Marabou spray bottles.
We've cornered the market in them for now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can also repurpose these bottles to spray other things. So liquid watercolor, watered down India ink, although that sounds like a real hand disaster waiting to happen. Not that I haven't been wrist deep in India ink before as well. That takes a long time to come off your hands. Okay. So the other thing that you could do is with the ones where you've used the pen is fill in the shapes that you use the pen to create. And you can kind of go back and forth between these things, right? So kind of experimenting with what happens if I take some of that crayon and go back here inside some of these circles. And then I've got another spot that I can do a little bit of resist. So a thing that I would invite you to think about in your art journal is that some of your pages will have more personal or emotional content, just out of the nature of it being a journal, right? And then some of it will be more like this, where I'm just playing with this, I'm trying out new materials, I'm seeing what happens, I'm enjoying the color and the texture, and that is what this page is about. It doesn't have to have necessarily like some kind of jaw-dropping emotional awareness that that happens in the course of working on a page like this. It might, right? This might be bringing something up, and you might realize something in the making of it. But don't feel like every page has to be some profound awareness. Give yourself permission to just play and enjoy working in a space that is just for you. Okay. So I'm going to let this page sit for a bit and I'll come back to it. And the next thing I wanted to do with you all is to work with the bonus prompt that came in our menu. So just as a reminder, the bonus prompt is: imagine your journal has a voice. What would it say to you right now? Draw a speech bubble on one of the pages and answer the question. So some of you have played with this prompt already. I've seen on Mix. It's been really fun to see those. And you could, like me, make the decision that I'm going to cut this out and use the actual text. I use the menu as a little bit of bonus ephemera as well. The other thing that I have that I'm going to play with this bonus prompt is I posted about this on Mix that I just recently taught myself how to do Polaroid transfers. And so this is a Polaroid that I created. And I was thinking about this prompt and I was like, what could I do? And I thought it would be really funny to do a Polaroid of myself with my mouth open and then do like a little speech bubble coming out of it. So that's what we're going to play with next. It's one of those things that I've always wanted to know how to do, and I just never learned. And I looked it up, and it's a miracle of the world that we're in now, where you can just kind of look up how to do things, and it's very easy. It was much easier than I thought. So here's another Polaroid transfer that I did of the same photograph that I used on the cover of my ArtJournalSnacks journal, and here's another one. They are so satisfying and fun to do. So I will, you'll be seeing more Polaroid transfers from me.
Erin, quick question before we move on. In the chat, to clarify, after I spray a page, as long as I put down a piece of wax paper, can I move on to another page?
Yes, absolutely. And that goes with everything that is likely to stick. So definitely acrylic paint, definitely the mixed media sprays, any kind of more like an oil-based marker or acrylic pens, anything that could adhere to itself. You want to be careful with that. And then you can also use waxed paper with wet watercolor or wet other media, and it'll change the texture a little bit, not quite as much as if you use plastic wrap and get that plastic wrap effect, but like this, I have some right here. So it won't do this, that's with plastic wrap letting something sit, but it will give kind of an interesting texture. So again, it's like that idea of moving one step beyond the material itself and playing with mixing lots of things together. Great question. Wax paper is your best art journaling friend. Sometimes I just put it between pages that I've used like a marker on because I don't know what I'm going to do on the next page, and so I want to keep that page neat or keep it from sticking. Okay, so I did the transfer onto watercolor paper. So the double stick tape that we received is a great tool for sticking something that's a little bit thicker, right? This is pretty thick watercolor paper. and I want to make sure that it stays put inside my art journal. And will a glue stick do that? Yes, but the double stick tape just does it a little bit better. So with something like this, I usually kind of go around the edges and then do like a piece down the middle. I know some people that get really into the double stick tape and do like stripes of double stick tape all along the back of whatever it is they're sticking on. You don't have to do that much. This is kind of a good amount. Okay. So double stick tape tip is to burnish it with your fingernail before you go to try to peel the backing off. It just makes it a little less frustrating, a little easier to peel up. If you have fake fingernails on or no fingernails at all, this can get a little bit tricky. So even an X-Acto blade or tweezers can help you. But once you get that end off, it usually peels off pretty nicely. So if you're doing something like this where you're going to be working your way around the shape, just remember that that part is now sticky. You don't want to touch it too much. Again, it's not the end of the world if you touch it with your fingers, but it will take a little bit of the stickiness away, especially if you have art materials on your hands already. Which for me is a constant situation. Okay. So I've got my little face there, and now I have to decide how I want to have it. I think I'm going to have the face going up and down, so I'll have the watercolor paper at a little bit of an angle, maybe going off the edge of the page a little bit, which I can trim later. Okay. And then I'm going to stick my bonus prompt on here somewhere. Maybe I'll stick it right there and have it go underneath the watercolor paper a little bit. Can you all hear my rooster? He's right outside the studio. The parrots are being very quiet, but the rooster is directly outside the studio right now. His name is Azul. Okay. So now I've got that, and now I'm going to make my speech bubble. And for my speech bubble, I am going to use an acrylic paint marker. And one of the things that I think is just funny to do is to just really make that speech bubble very cartoon style, coming all the way out of my mouth. I'm going to have it come over here onto this page, so I have plenty of room for writing. A thing that I'm aware of that I do very often is sometimes I make my speech bubble a certain size and it's not nearly big enough to contain everything I want to say. So sometimes I over exaggerate it and go the opposite direction. And I can already see I really love the way that this paint pen looks against the Polaroid transfer, because the paint pen is a little bit matte and the Polaroid transfer has a little bit of gloss to it. So it's got, I think you can see that there, how it's matte finish against that. I'm just going to make this line a little bit thicker. When you get to a spot like this where your art journal is starting to get full and you can't quite get the pigment into the gutter, you can fold it open a little bit more and just tap it right in there. So another benefit to this kind of a journal, I know some people really like a hardcover sketchbook, but for an art journal, do I use hardcover art journals sometimes? Yes, but there's something really nice about a soft cover book that you can fold it all the way back on itself and manipulate it in different ways that you really can't do with a hardcover book. So I'm not sure if this is going to end up being about what my journal is saying to me or what I'm saying to my journal, since the picture is me. But I suppose in some ways the journal is also me. So okay. So then what to do about this spot, right? Because this, I've got the white of the paper. This, I have a little bit of the Polaroid transfer there. Now, there's a couple things I could do. I could take another paint and go over that inside part and then fill in the space of this, or I could take an X-Acto blade and cut this away. And I think that's what I'm going to do. And now with this, you just have to be careful. This is thick paper that I'm cutting into, but the risk of cutting through to the next page of the journal, if that's there, not the end of the world. If it happens, you just can patch it from the other side. So when I'm doing this, I'll be a little bit cautious at first. And I'm just trying to peel this up. There we go, got it. And then usually you have to do a little bit of patching, but not too bad. That worked out pretty darn well. Cool. So then I have this page to kind of decide what I want my art journal to be saying, or what I want to say to my art journal. And I'm not sure I'm ready to fill that part in yet, but I do want to add some background here. So I'm going to actually take another one of the stencils. And for this one, I think, let's see, we'll do this one. We'll do the diamond pattern. And I'm going to slide it in here. And I'm going to take another crayon. Now here it gets a little bit hard because you can't quite get this stencil up to the line of the gutter. But you do the best you can. There, you know, if I was really being a perfectionist about it, I could trim my stencil, trim that border away, but then it becomes a little more fragile. So I think what I'll do is just fill in that part with a little bit of scribbling with the colored pencil. And then I'll do maybe a little of that right here too. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to address about the stencils today is these are paper stencils. They're a really nice paper that holds up really well for this. The great thing about them is you can get a very crisp cut with this paper, but I know some people have been a little bit concerned about the longevity of it. I can tell you that I have a couple of paper stencils that I've had for probably 25 years. They're fine. They actually end up, I think, getting better and better as you continue using them. So this one I've used on both sides now. That is something I like to do, is kind of alternate. I've used it on this side. Next time I'm going to turn it over and use it on this side. And what'll happen over time, depending on the type of material you're using, you will get a little bit of buildup there in the stencil. In my opinion, that ends up making it better. It ends up making it more interesting. At some point, I'll try to remember to pull down some of my well-loved, well-worn stencils from many years ago and show you just how interesting I think they are, right? Because we all got these stencil sets, but your stencils will become yours, right? They become almost your artistic or creative vocabulary. and they'll be just yours, right? Because of the history that you've used them with. So another thing you can do is you can spray them with like a, I would say using a matte would be a better choice, like a matte spray paint, and do both sides. Again, setting it on wax paper, spray one side, peel it up, make sure you don't have any leftover stuff there, and spray the other side. And then you've got something that's a little bit more waterproof, but you really don't need to do that. They hold up pretty darn well. So don't be afraid to use them. They're really fun and really useful. So don't be precious with them. Maybe that's a good way to say it. Okay. So I'm just going to do a little bit more a little bit more scribbling. Need to tell Azul that I'm awake. He doesn't need to crow to wake me up. He has to get up pretty early to wake me up. Okay, because this blue crayon will create a resist to play with later. So maybe what my art journal is going to say to me, or what I'm going to say to my art journal, is something about scribbling and the joy of doing it. Add a little bit more color in here. All right, I'm gonna let that sit. And I had another page I wanted to show you that incorporates stencils and also some vintage text and some collage. So I found these two zebras in a catalog, and I thought they were so sweet. And I really love zebras. A team at my prior workplace, we called ourselves Team Zebra, and we really thought about ourselves as being kind of different than the rest of our team members. So I have a very warm, fuzzy place in my heart for zebras, and I wanted to do a page about them. And then in one of the vintage encyclopedia pages that I cut up for you all, there was this entry for zebra. So I thought that would be the perfect thing to add in on this page. And then we have this striped stencil. So I thought, well, perfect. I've got just the thing to go in on this page. So again, I have some mark making done on either side of this. So that makes it a little bit more complicated for doing a rubbing technique with this. So I think what I'm going to do is use, find it here. I'm going to use an alcohol marker. Now, one of the things to think about with a marker, especially a brush marker like I'm using right now, this is the Tombow alcohol-based brush marker. Hint, hint, the marker sale is still happening. But a thing to know with using a brush marker and a stencil is that you have a little bit of risk of the point of your marker going under the line of the stencil, especially with one like this where there are big expanses of unattached paper. So the likelihood of getting a little bit more of a mess with your stencil is a little high. That's okay. Again, this is your art journal. It's a place to play. There are no mistakes. And if you really hate what you did, you just cover it. You just use that page for collage. Or, and I have done this, if you really don't like what you did, no one's going to know if you tear that page out. You can just tear it out or cut it up. My suggestion, if you do that, is to leave a little bit of edge and then glue these pages together on either side so that you don't end up tearing it out all the way down to the stitching, because you might make your book a little bit loose. But
Hey,
again,
Erin, jumping
yeah.
in here real quick. Just want to let you know we're halfway through class.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
So again, this is your book. You make the rules. And if you tear a page out, you can also add a page in, which is something else you can do really easily with the double stick tape. It's a great tool for adding in more pages. Okay, so fun thing you can do with this stencil is immediately splice it back in to make some of your stripes a little longer. And this works with all of your stencils. All the repeating patterns in this stencil can be extended like this, where you just kind of line up. What I like to do is get about an inch or so lined back up, and then I can keep going with the pattern. And this is just my personal preference. I like to fade it away a little bit. And so with this one, I think I'm going to fade a little bit of it onto this other page. So now I have a little background for my zebras. I've got a little bit more striping here. And now I have my bit of text that I want to put in. And I could make a couple choices here. I could cut it and cut it very close to that text. Or, you know, this is an old encyclopedia, so it has the rounded edges. It's got a very well-worn bit of paper to it. You can see there's almost looks like someone drew on a different page. It's got a little bit of indentation here. So I think I'm going to leave it exactly how it is and put it in maybe right there. With this thin paper, and some of the paper that you got in this box is very old. So just be aware if you're using a glue stick to be a little bit gentle as you're putting the glue on the back. It might rip. And again, if it rips, that's fine. You can just slice it in. Maybe you accentuate the rip, make it stand out a little bit more. And you may see what I just saw. I have a little bit of cut through here from my other page. And that is fine because the Azul thinks it's fine too. I have some more ephemera here. It's some black tissue paper that I can put over the top of where I cut through and start to add some other textures in. So because this is a clean cut from that other side, and I don't want what I'm going to do next to go through, I'm just going to slide a little bit of wax paper in there. And then this is very, very matte medium, moved into a little jar with a brush in the lid. And what I like about this extra matte medium is it creates a really interesting texture once it's dry. So this spot that I'm splicing the black tissue paper in can end up becoming really interesting and dynamic because I can rub back over the top with colored pencil or with wax crayon, and it creates a really interesting effect. Okay. So I'm kind of building up a bigger layer there because partially because I want it to be a very black, but also because it's a pretty deep cut. And then since I've done it there, I think I'll do a little bit more black up here, and this will help with that hard line there where the stencil ended. If I'm using matte medium into the gutter of the page, I like to really push it in, because one of the things that can happen is you'll put something into the gutter of your page and then you open the book up and it kind of cracks all the way down that gutter. So you really want to make sure it gets in there. The other really nice thing about an extra matte medium like this one is with a gloss medium, it's a lot more likely that even after that's all the way dry, your page is going to stick together. Whereas with the matte medium and the very matte medium like this, that doesn't happen. I'm just going to put a little bit more of this in here. And again, I'll let this dry. I'm going to leave this edge going off the edge like this. One of the things that I like to do with tissue paper into my art journal is once this is dry, I'll wrap some of this around to the next page. And that's how you start to get that wonderful side view that you all know I love, where the edge of the pages end up looking not like paper at all anymore. So I'm going to let that dry just the way it is.
Hey, Erin, before you dive into your next page, quick question about matte medium. Now, I know it's not something that we've put in a box before. So for those of us who are new to the world of matte medium, can you explain some like specifics of what to look for when you're buying matte medium?
Great question. So there's the whole range. You can get a super gloss, you can get an extra matte, and everything in between. What it is a clear acrylic medium. So it doesn't have any pigment in it. It's what suspends the pigment in your regular acrylic paint. You can get also things like modeling paste and other acrylic mediums that are a little bit more thick. Those are great for mixed media work. They're not quite as good in an art journal, although they can be used. I would recommend either just a basic matte medium or the extra matte medium for using in an art journal, just because you can use a lot more over the top of them, like pencil, like colored pencil, like crayon, even watercolor. Whereas with a gloss matte medium, you can use marker and like permanent marker or paint pen or acrylic paint over the top, but some of the other media won't go over the top of that more glossy medium. It can, but it tends to move around a lot more. So my preference is for an ultra matte medium. The nice thing about more of a gloss is you get a little bit more resist. So that's a thing to know as well, is that if you're interested in a little bit more of that glossy resist, then a regular gloss medium will get that for you. Okay. So I wanted to show a couple other things in the service of this idea of like filling your pages with stuff to start your journaling. Okay, I see. Before we go on to that, I'll address the question in the chat about if your medium has gone a bit thick. Yes, you can use the either an acrylic extender or an acrylic flow medium into it. And you can also use water. You can also water it down a little bit. One thing you wouldn't want to use is if you open up the top and it has a strange smell, like any of you who have opened up tempera paint that's very old know the smell I'm talking about. that means that something got into the container, like some kind of organic compound got into the container, maybe from your brush, and that's a little bit of mold. You don't want to use that. But if it's just a little thick, you can use a little media over top. Okay, so this is one of the things I'm talking about when I'm talking about just prepping pages to play on. I did this a while ago. I don't know what this page is going to turn into. It has some bleed through from the previous page. It has a little bit of watercolor. It's got a little salt into the watercolor and some scribbling and a little bit of gold glitter that I wiped off of something else. So this page will become something. I really encourage you to, when you're playing in your journal, maybe you're working on a page and then you use up whatever you have left on other pages so that they are ready to go. Same deal here, just kind of playing with leftover material, getting pages ready to play with. And a little bit more here. This shows kind of the variety that you can get with the spray, where if you spray really, really close proximity to the page, or back way up and spray it from further away, you can get everything from like a solid cover to a very fine mist to a big splatter, all with the same spray bottle. And then what I was talking about with the very matte medium and then going back over, this is crayon back over the top of the texture that was created with that super matte medium, just with the brush that's in that lid there. Okay, any questions at this point? All right, so I wanted to show you a couple things in another journal that I've been working on that are examples of this. So here's another version of this idea of using a speech bubble. This has some interesting texture in it. Just this idea of like having a dialogue back and forth between you and your journal. We were talking about the Polaroid transfers. So here's a page that has a Polaroid, Polaroid transfers, and some text. So we received some interesting found text in this past ephemera kit. And one of the things to think about is you don't need to save all the text. So you can go in and pull out the text, pull out the parts of the text that are interesting to you. And you can do that by drawing little boxes around them, or as I did here, I actually used watercolor like a highlighter and highlighted the text that I thought was interesting and I wanted to save. This page is from a book that my mom read, and we had such high hopes for the book based on its cover and the title, but it ended up being an awful book. She hated it. She only got partway through it and she just really thought it was very stupid. But because it was about gardens, in some ways, there were some interesting texts in it about gardens, and there were some things in there about grief, and so there's some useful text. So if you have a book that you ended up hating, don't toss it. It can become wonderful ephemera. Another Polaroid I was playing with. The idea of just filling a page with writing, right? This is another thing that you can do and then continue adding to it, right? Go back in, add more. And then playing with weird ephemera. So this has some of the brush pens on here, some watercolor, some paper from a bubble wrap mailer, and a $5 sticker from, I think it was from asparagus from the grocery store. And then you can see that this is a page that actually would have benefited from having the wax paper in it before I shut it, because this is a water-based marker and this paper here is canvas paper. So there's a little bit of transfer over here, but I don't hate it. It's actually kind of interesting to see the mirrored text on there. So I might leave it and see what happens. So this is a journal that I finished recently. So you can see the start date there. Oops, did I freeze? There. Start date and then end date on this one. I put the end date on the back. I finished this one yesterday during a live class that I was doing. Okay, so I see a question about the sprays. Oh, yes. Okay, so about cleaning them. So these have very, very fine holes there. And you can see that there's a little bit of this puddled here from spraying it with you all today. I like to use like an alcohol wipe, like just from the drugstore. I have a whole container of alcohol wipes here that I use for various things, moving alcohol ink around, getting stuff off my hands. And it's also really great for wiping these down, just wiping the tip of them. If they do get clogged, you can take the lid off entirely and let this part drip out. I would suggest letting it drip onto an art journal page so you're not wasting your time. You can make marks while you're waiting to clean something up. Get it completely cleaned off, and you can run this under hot water, right, and clean it out that way. And then even put it, and be very careful with this, because I've absolutely sprayed myself in the face in the service of cleaning out a spray bottle before. But you can put it into a little cup of hot water and then use the spray mechanism and until you spray it clear. Okay, so that's a way that you can work with it. Now, if this clogs entirely, maybe you were using them and then you didn't use them for a while and you wanted to come back to it, no worries, right? Because this media in here is still good and you can use it with all sorts of things. So you can use it with a regular brush. You can take a little bit of it. Yeah. You can even take a little bit of paper towel. I'm just going to set this right here for a moment and tilt that over. Now I've got some of that media on here. And I think this peacock pink that I got will go nicely with these zebras. So I can just rub it on with this. And now remember, this looks like watercolor, but it is acrylic. So if I leave kind of some more streaky areas, that actually will create a resist because it is acrylic medium. And then you can build up layers with that over time. So even if your spray mechanism doesn't last the whole life of this bottle, the media will. You can use this down to the very last drop. So don't get discouraged if your spray bottle gets clogged or you forget to clean it and that happens. This material will last you a long time. So don't give up on it. Great question. Okay, so I'm trying to pull the sprayer out and spray on the paper. Okay, the straw portion dripped. Yes, it does drip, but grabbing journals from all over the place. Here we go. So you have to be a little bit careful. You can see I'm running it along the edge there so that it's not like a huge drip. And you can kind of use your edge to pull it along. Now it's not going to be a perfectly straight line, but that's also kind of the fun of it, is you get something more organic. Some of you have seen me use a pizza cutter to make lines. If you haven't seen that, I can show you at some point again. It's another way to get fun lines that you can then write on later. And I'll show you a page where I did that in just a moment here. Get a couple more lines. So you can do straight lines, you can do scribbles, you can kind of use the side of this. There's lots of different ways to use these tools. And that's something I really want you all to hear is there are tips and tricks and ways to use materials. And then there's your own experimentation as well. And I really encourage you to experiment with these materials and try them out and use them in as many different ways as you can dream up. And then share those with each other and continue doing that. So here's a page where I made with the, I think it's cocoa. Yeah, with the cocoa spray. I made lines for myself here that I then wrote on. And then this little drawing of myself in my pink puffy jacket, I used that by dipping a brush actually inside the sprayer. So I didn't use the sprayer at all, but rather I used a brush and brushed it with a paintbrush and then added some watercolor over top of that. Okay, so it creates these really wonderful spots to write, and it's kind of fun to give yourself a place to write where you have larger spaces for text and smaller spaces for text. Okay. So I see the question about resist. So I'm going to try to get here's a good example. Okay. So on this page, there's a couple different things acting as a resist. This is wax crayon. And what the wax is doing is pushing the watercolor away. So the watercolor can't go there. So it's keeping the color of the page. And then here, get it a little closer. The acrylic paint pen also acts as a resist, but it's a little bit more matte. So it retains its color even if you paint over the top with a water-based media. And then same thing here, you can see the wax crayon that's resisting the watercolor. So it just means that it's pushing away the other media and maintaining its own color or maintaining the color of the page. I can show you another way that you might do that is with a white crayon, which will, if you're using it on light paper, it'll maintain the color of the paper. So when you go back over it with watercolor, the white of the paper stands out. And then you can also use either watered down acrylic or use the mixed media sprays, and they will also work as with the resist of the wax. So you can see here too how that dried acrylic media is also resisting both the watercolor and the other acrylic media. So layers on layers on layers of that, right? And since we're talking about it, maybe I'll go back in again. Really kind of messy with the matte medium, which will have a whole different kind of resist, because this is the super matte medium. The wax crayon has more of a glossy resist to it. This will have a little bit more matte, which will make a different kind of a texture. So I've created for myself here a place I could do some writing, a place I could add some imagery, and maybe some more imagery over here, or maybe some collage, or maybe using some different ephemera. So at this point, I would love to see if anyone has any questions or would like to share. And then I have a couple more things I can show us afterwards. but I want to make sure that if anyone would like to share, we have a little time for that.
Hey, Erin, I am unmuted here. So if anybody wants to share, oh, I see a virtual hand. So Marion, I'll just ask you to unmute yourself and I will spotlight you so we can see.
Okay, I was just gonna say what I've been doing today. I started working on this journal page and I've been trying to do the things Dr. Erin has been doing. So I have some stenciling and old pages and tissue paper and paint and stuff like that. And I did the bonus prompt. I've been using my journal as a weekly planner too. So I'm just finishing up this. And I want to say also, if anybody is a neatnik like me and wants a cover, this is the Jibun Techo cover. And it fits exactly this book. I don't know why, but it does. Anyway, on the very first page of this journal, I had this squirrel talking to me about whether or not I was going to do a good job. So on the back page, I also drew a squirrel expressing his opinion on whether or not I'm doing a good job here or wondering about it. So that's what my speech bubble is.
Love it. I love that the squirrel character has made has reprised his or her thought. That's good. Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to show off some things they made? I see Jean just flashed her hand at me. All right, go for it.
Good afternoon. This was what I was working on today. I escaped to my sewing machine so I can make a tiny journal. And my journal is going to tell me that it is here for me and that it will always support me without judgment during my art time. And my local coffee shop is starting bubble teas today. So this is, my husband and I went for bubble tea this morning. So I celebrated that by giving myself a page in my journal for it. And thank you for today.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I see virtual hand. Jill, you may unmute yourself.
Hi there. Thank you, Dr. Erin, again for so much fun. I always really enjoy these sessions. I recently got a fortune cookie that says, don't get so caught up in the daily grind that you never find any time to enjoy yourself. And that's actually what's been happening to me. So that was my prompt with my bubble. I have been having fun with the spray bottle. I did the front of my journal with it. I actually stuck it in the ArtSnacks box and just sprayed it. And then I used a stencil on the back. So that was kind of fun as well. And the colored pencil works really good too with the stencils if you do the other part. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Looks good. So let's go to Anne-Marie Jordan and then we'll go to Jenny. So Anne-Marie, feel free to unmute yourself.
Good morning. So this was my first spray and I think it came out really fun. I sprayed the plum and then put the stencil in with the chili. And then while we've been learning, this is what I started with the bonus prompt. For some reason, the first thing that my journal said was grow, and then that made me think of the green. So I've pulled out like every green marker, paint pen, gel pen that I've found so far, and have been using this cool stencil. And I guess I would say the one that I feel like I love the most, I'm going to call it like waves. Not the chevron. I don't know where I put it right now, but it kind of looked like waves. And I live out in Washington and I don't live near the ocean, but I always want to be at the ocean. So waves are kind of my like they're like Erin's polka dots. Waves would be my like go-to pattern. So thanks everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm going to jump over to Jenny England. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak. We're getting a visual.
Ooh.
Today.
Oh, fun. Look at all those great stamps.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to show off what they've made today? While you all are waiting, I actually found in my studio, I have a whole board from Golden of gel mediums. These are all examples. This was back in the day when Golden thought we were opening an art supply store, when really we're an online store. So in most art supply stores, they send their retailer partners this giant board so you can get an idea of what all the mediums produce. So hard to see on Zoom here, but I'm going to take a photo of this and post it to the mixed group so you can get a more detailed shot of what Golden has to offer. We don't have any of these in our shop right now, but yeah, if they become popular, maybe we'll add some.
I'm happy to geek out on different acrylic media anytime.
Totally. It's also very organized, which makes me happy. So I will hand it over to Sherry. I see your virtual hand is raised.
Okay, I was playing along and I did this for my journal voice. I found this in it's a book from my garage. My husband is like a do-it-yourself book anyway. And so it will say, remember, there are no rules, which is something that I'm still working on with our journals.
Love that. Thank you. Good message. And I have, I think, some friends to your do-it-yourself lady there. Sherry, I'll show you. This was an ad from one of the Life magazines that I was cutting up for you all. And here are, it has kind of a before and after version of this couple putting up that wood paneling, you know, that like false wood paneling. So this is them following the directions and putting up their wood paneling. You can see that they're in their jeans and their khakis. And then here they are after in their lovely living room with their beautiful dress. And so this is like the life they lead after they have their lovely wood paneling put in. And I had wanted to show you all this page because this is one of those pages that's kind of taking it to the nth degree with all the different things in it. A lot of which is from this most recent box, and it has a theme that I wanted to pass along that is a recent word that I've learned that is just perfect. So you can see the ad, there's some collage from another source, there's a little bit from that vintage typing manual. This is from a catalog. I think it was a pattern on a dress. And there's a little bit of washi tape in here and a little bit of writing, a little bit of kind of holding on to the text that was there and highlighting some of the text. I like this word improve. And then down here, I wrote the Latin phrase horror vacui. And this is a word that comes from the Victorian era, and it means a fear of empty spaces. And it was about the kind of tendency in that time to get not just one houseplant, but all the houseplants, and then to have every possible surface have something on it. And you can see a bit in my background of my studio that I have a little bit of this, right? Like I'm a bit of a bowerbird, and I like to have pretty textured, interesting things around. And that is something that is fun to play with in your art journal as well, is this idea of the fear of empty spaces and filling it with pattern and color and texture and like everything that you can possibly fill it with. So I think it's a great aesthetic to bring into your art journal, is this idea of like, if it doesn't feel quite right, keep going, right? Keep going with the texture, keep going with the patterns, do a lot of little mark making. This page built up over many days of work because it just never quite felt done. I put the advertisement in with this text, and then I didn't know what to do with it for quite a while. So it took a little bit of time to find the right things that fit, and finding, you know, the pattern here from the clothing, and then adding a little bit of the washi tape, and then continuing to go with the watercolor helped it come together and really embody that aesthetic. And then another page that some of you saw partway in, and this is how it has gotten finished up with one of the fruit labels, or one of the food labels that we received in this box. And then the Polaroid transfer, a lot more mark making in here, a little room for writing. And I posted the other day peeling off this express mail label. And I love the way the red here goes so nicely with this. And then this is from the previous box. And then this is that super matte medium again. And you can see the texture that builds up here. I want to show another page. This came from the same catalog that had those zebras, and this is giraffes. So thought it would be fun to play with the giraffes here. I was a little disappointed with the way that this photograph was, because in the catalog itself, this giraffe didn't have a head. And I was kind of upset about that at first, but then I thought, well, I'll just paint the edge and add things onto the edge, and then kind of like the giraffe is going that way. And it doesn't bother me quite as much anymore. You can see the rubbing here from the polka dot stencil. I probably use that stencil the most. And then playing with that idea of that pattern with some brush mark making tools, right? So kind of the more even, regular pattern from the stencil, and then the hand done pattern that replicates that a little bit, but then also goes a bit with the giraffe pattern. Although now that I'm thinking about it, this maybe would have been a better stencil to use for the giraffes, right? So next time, my next giraffe page. I'll give an update on the toilet paper page. Some of you may have seen this on Mix. This is the wrapper from some toilet paper in a hotel room that I just really loved the pattern. And here's how it's been incorporated into the art journal. Here's another example of the resist. So this is that super matte medium. This is ink rubbed back against the page, and you can see that the matte medium is protecting the white of the page here, where I've brushed it past the toilet paper wrapper. That's not really a phrase I ever thought I would say. Created this lovely resist there. I also added a little bit of, this is the backing paper from behind a set of stickers, and it was just too pretty to throw out, and it has a nice like pastel paper type texture to it. So I made a little flip out, and we'll see what evolves there. More matte medium on the surface, and then rubbing with both colored pencil and wax crayon on them. And I took off the brand of the toilet paper, but left that word professional. I thought that was funny. This definitely fits in that horror vacui category. There is a collage catalog page in the background here with poppies, and then this is a wrapper from cherry tomatoes that were called poppies. So I thought that was kind of a good combo, and I just stuck it right over the top with, this is actually Mod Podge that has glitter in it. I see I have a couple art therapists in the Zoom today, and this glitter Mod Podge was actually from the art therapy conference that was in Sacramento in, what was that, like 2010? Maybe, and they were closing up the studio afterwards. We always have an art studio at the conference, and they were closing up the studio, and there was all this opened matte medium and acrylic, and I happened to be there, and they said, take it home. So I have glitter Mod Podge, which is not something I necessarily would go out and buy, but I do like the way it works on some of these pages that just need that. So there's a little bit of glitter Mod Podge on there. This is acrylic ink, just using the dropper to draw with it and then spraying with a spray bottle to get this little running effect. This is kind of similar to something Bree was doing in watercolor snacks with using the spray bottle to get these interesting textures, spraying something when it's still wet. And then this is a rubbing from a bigger stencil using wax so that it gets a little resist. And then this is something we've been talking about, this idea of extending your page. So if you have a big piece of ephemera, fill the whole page and then let it go beyond the page, and then it can fold over. And then the whole thing folds up, right? So don't feel limited by the size of your journal. Your pages can be much bigger. You can have parts that fold out. Same thing here, more pages to fall out. This is kind of similar to what Sarah showed, except this is watercolor swatches. This one doesn't have texture. And I did this page in the ArtSnacks Open Studio the other day. So playing, and this part I did on campus. Okay, so now we're back here to my zebras, and this is almost dry. I shouldn't have shut that page, so I'm going to put the wax paper in on this now. But before I do that, probably what I want to do is start to finish the edges a little bit. And again, some of you have seen me do this before. This is just an ink pad that I'm using to rub the edges. And you can see that just that little thing starts to help the page feel like it's coming together. You can use any ink pad to do this. I recommend using one that's not not meant for embossing, those more puffy ink pads. They can work, but it's better to use a dye-based ink pad.
Erin, can you show us the front of the ink pad? Oh, okay, cool.
Ranger archival ink. Permanent, which is a good thing. Otherwise, it'll rub off on your fingers and move around if you decide to go back in with watercolor. I think I'm going to do a little bit more color on this since I'm waiting for that part to dry.
We have about 5 minutes left to class. So do you want to do more work, or do you want to open it up to everybody else?
Yeah, let me just show you one thing and then let's open it up. I just want to show how nicely this vintage paper takes watercolor. And show one more time where that resist is happening. Because I didn't brush the medium over this entire fragment from the dictionary page. So you can see right there where it's starting to make a resist, and it's a little bit raised up. So that actually will create this lovely texture that I can go back in later once this is dry and put even more color on top of that part. So I think the kind of the upshot of it all is lots of layers. Play with lots of layers. It's if you're not sure what to do, just add a layer of something and then step away from it for a little while and come back to it later and add another layer and see what happens and keep experimenting. Okay. So yeah, let's go back to the room and see if there's any last questions or other ideas.
Yeah, if anyone, you don't have to show your art, you can ask a question or share a comment.
Tell us which stencil is your favorite.
Yes, which stencil is your favorite question? We love that. I do have one small announcement before class ends today, and that is about the next live stream that's happening on Saturday, May 13th. For those of you who don't know, Saturday, May 13th is World Collage Day. So what we did is we have made the ArtJournalSnacks live stream for that day open to the public. So definitely come and bring your friends if you'd like. We have it's going to be on Zoom again. So we have the Zoom link posted to the general ArtSnacks mix group. So, you know how we have a private group for ArtJournalSnacks, and then we have everything else basically. The Zoom link is in the everything else section. So we will send an email about it with the Zoom link. I guess we ask that if you bring somebody or invite somebody else, just make sure they're signed up for Mix. It's totally free, and they will get the Zoom link. So when we send out the email, you can just forward it to them, and it will essentially be a class just like this, but it'll be more focused on elements of collage, and Erin will be leading it as well. So Erin, you want to tell us a little bit about Collage Magazine?
Yeah, so if you're big into collages like Sarah and I both are, there's a magazine for us called Collage Magazine. They're one of the founders of World Collage Day. It was started in 2018, and it's a worldwide event that we're partaking in by being part of World Collage Day. And then the Collage Magazine, this is they have lots of issues of it, but this is the World Collage Day special edition. And I was showing Lee and Sarah the other day that it has in it some pre-made pages with all sorts of interesting things to cut out in collage, including this page, which I think I'm going to give my brother and sister-in-law, but it's just a page of steaks and meat. Just, just in case. It's not really my vibe, but I don't know. I'll give it to my brother. But it does have a page with a Spix macabre, so that made me really happy. So we're going to have so much fun. Bring your art journals. Collage is a wonderful material, a wonderful thing to do in your journal. Bring your ephemera. We're going to be using some interesting things in our collages as well. And then I put a note on Mix because I would really recommend that you get something for this. And I'll say a tiny bit about it. Grab it real quick.
I just posted in the chat the collageinstitute.org website, and there's World Collage Day events on that page, and the ArtJournalSnacks one is listed on that page. So you can see literally everyone around the world is going to be participating in some form. So you have options.
But you should go with our option. This is the thing that I'm suggesting that you get. There's information about it on Mix. It's called Neverdull. This is a metal polish, but you can do really magical things with collage and magazine images. So bring your magazines, get some Neverdull. I suggest working in a place with a little bit of ventilation if you're going to use this. So, and I'll do some more follow-up things on Mix afterwards. So if you can't join us and want to know more about this, I'll do some more things with it on Mix because it's very fun. So that'll be a good thing. And then last thing I wanted to say, in your ephemera packs, you got some quilling paper, some very thin little strips of paper. We're going to be playing with that specifically in one of our live sessions. So if you haven't used it yet, hold on to it. If you have already used it, don't worry. And one other thing I wanted to suggest is these shredding scissors. You can get them most office supply places, but they're very fun for making things that you can weave in your art journal. So
I literally thought that was a bunch of scissors glued together. That's amazing. I don't know if either of these items can be shipped in ArtSnacks boxes, primarily because of weight, as well as the danger of sending scissors to all of our customers. Very risky, but great to know. If you could add links to those in Mix, I will 100% be buying some shredding scissors. Those are amazing.
Will do.
Awesome. All right, everyone, we are at time for today. I want to thank all of you for joining us live on your Earth Day, and also thank you, Erin, for your time today. Again, this will be recorded and we will post it on the Mix group as soon as we can, probably on Monday. So In the
And post
meantime, oh, what's that?
And post what you made today on Mix or as it
Oh, yeah.
continues.
We want to see. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Ready?
Bye.